This is Entrepreneurial Edge. I'm Lerato Mbele, standing in for Chris Bishop. Thank you so much for your time. Now, every business venture, regardless of the economic climate, the market conditions, the products, the personnel, and the capitalization, has its own risks. You know that. Yet when these risks are understood and identified, mechanisms can be put in place to mitigate them. In this edition of the show, we're going to be taking a closer look at the concept of risk management and the role that it plays within businesses here and across the African continent. But before we kick off the discussion, according to the global risk management company Pasco, every opportunity has its downside risks, and to identify and eliminate these risks can be more important than grasping the opportunity that created them. We asked the Pasco CEO, George Nicholls, to just elaborate a little bit on this one.
Formed in 1996, Pasco is a South African company based in Johannesburg. They started primarily as a risk consultancy, working on South African issues. As their reputation and client base grew, they took on more challenges. They now offer their services to both local and international clientele.
There's a range of services, but I think we can put them into two areas primarily. The first area is dealing with advisory work, such as political advisory, risk-based around contingencies, such as who am I dealing with, which country am I going into, is it safe and secure, what can you do, what can't you do, what can you tell me about the risks of entering such a market. And then the second half of our business is more the reactory work, which is security-driven, asset recovery, forensic investigations, whereby something has gone wrong and they want some remedy, and they call us to advise them and assist in determining what went wrong and collecting or recovering assets that have been misappropriated.
With 14 years of risk management experience, Nicholls has been witness to the changes in the risk management landscape during and after South Africa's political revolution.
South African risk management has changed over 14 years dramatically, coming out of isolation and apartheid into the new world. I think that we've changed and adapted very quickly. So possibly in 1994, from what I can recall, we did things rather rudimentarily and so simply. These days I think we're quite sophisticated. I think our financial risk systems are very good. And as we venture further afield into Africa and into the Middle East and other territories, we're finding that companies are realizing to compete on an international level, they have to deal with risk in a sophisticated way. Internationally, I think risk is a very mature market. Risk consultants is a very mature market. There's a lot of legislation in the US, the UK and other places like Europe that drive risk matters, and so companies like ours are often consulted as a matter of fact on any type of transaction or business scenario.
He says managing risk is both essential for established companies as well as rising entrepreneurs.
Entrepreneurs and companies are, in some respects, are very similar and again very different. Companies have a very standard methodology of dealing with risk, and primarily over the last few years I think it's focused on financial risks. We've seen a change where it's more holistic treatment of risk these days, and I think companies realise they need a range of specialties and specialists and resources to deal with a multitude of things in addition to financial risk. Entrepreneurs often fare better than companies in some respects, that they use intuition or gut feel. But I think where both the entrepreneurs and companies do have a need to look at risk management is where it falls outside of traditional things such as contingent liabilities, contingent risks associated with people or processes or territories which are unfamiliar.
Managing your company's risk appears to have become a rather significant part of good corporate governance.
Joining us now on the program to give their views on risk management are George Nicholls, the CEO of Pasco, and Alton Bondi, the founder and CEO of CIS. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming through. Let's start with you, Alton Bondi. Just give us a sense of how risk management has changed because of the global economic crisis.
I think it most certainly has, and people are a lot more cautious and they're becoming a lot more precise in the way that they look at and manage risk. And I think this is driven by a number of factors. First of all, capital is a lot more scarce now than what it was, for example, access to capital than what it was, for example, 2 or 3 years ago. So projects are now looked at with a sharper look, a more precise look. And I believe the same for startups. Venture capital is not as available as it was a few years ago, so entrepreneurs would submit their business plans to venture capital firms, and they look at it a lot more precisely. So I think it's people are a lot more bearish about taking risk now.
All right, we know that some of the figures in terms of the survival rate for smaller, medium enterprises have been a lot more positive than for some of the larger corporates in South Africa. To that extent then, what has the condition and the situation been for the entrepreneur given the changing credit and economic climate?
Well, I think it's fair to say the entrepreneur has a lot of possibilities and opportunities at their disposal that maybe are a bit more risky than the large firms would like to take on. So consequently, entrepreneurs, small businesses can jump onto opportunities as they arise, where larger businesses may take a bit of time to get there. Having said that, where larger businesses are not prepared to put capital into ventures, the entrepreneurs will take the chance. The downside is understanding that risk and being able to deal with it.
Okay, let's identify the broader risk that the entrepreneur faces in doing business in the current economic environment. Already Alton has identified the risk to accessing capital because banks are very scared to lend, and there are a lot of restrictions in that space. But many people would also say doing business in a country like South Africa, the skills deficit is a crisis.
Absolutely, and I think a skills deficit, but it's not just skills resources, it's a range of resources the entrepreneur would need access to. Skills is one, access to good advice, understanding the cultural and legislative requirements in the country, and finally things such as political risk and security risk rank high amongst the things that people should be dealing with when they venture into new territories.
I'd agree with that, and I'd like to add to that. I think that with any new entrepreneurial startup or venture, typically it would be somebody who's offering something new to the market or an alternative to the market. And in times such as we're in now, where people are a lot more cautious, decisions take longer, people, organizations are reluctant to embrace change. So when entrepreneurs bring new products and services to the market, what would have been a good idea and easily embraced by the market some years ago, today corporations and other potential clients look at those a little bit skeptically. So I think there's a market risk. Having said that, as George said, there's a lot of opportunity in that. If entrepreneurs bring products and services to the market, that will potentially save corporations money.
What about the business that was started in the good times when the growth trajectory was very positive and now has to survive in these rugged times? What sort of mitigating techniques can be applied?
Well, I think in any times when any time is bad, cash is king. So businesses which aren't overgeared, which have good cash management, which have loyal clients, which pay on time, I think those are the key things, cash flow. Outside of that, it's being able to deal with risk. Risk is an ever-changing scenario. You need to evaluate it and monitor it continually. And when you notice things which should be changing, you should be able to react quickly to it. For an example, the recent economic crisis, leading indicators could have been slow payments from suppliers. It could have been warning notices from governments. It could have been the uptick in a range of financial indicators. Businesses, entrepreneurs have to keep on top of these things and need to evaluate them so that they can use them to their advantage.
Alton, in terms of planning for a worst case scenario, you had a good idea, you got the financing to support it, now you need to sustain the business, you hadn't anticipated this. How do you factor in some of these worst case scenarios?
I think try and get some more funding if you need it.